Heat is one of the largest drivers changing the niche of human habitability. Between 2040 and 2060, extreme temperatures will become commonplace in the south and southwest, with some counties in Arizona experiencing temperatures above 95 degrees for half the year. When heat meets excessive humidity, the body can no longer cool itself by sweating. That combination creates wet bulb temperatures, where 82 degrees can feel like southern Alabama on its hottest day, making it dangerous to work outdoors, and for children to play school sports. As wet bulb temperatures increase even higher, so will the risk of heat stroke, and even death. By mid-century, heat and humidity in Missouri will feel like Louisiana does today, while some areas we don't usually think of as humid, like southwestern Arizona, will see soaring wet bulb temperatures because of factors like sun angle, wind speed, and cloud cover reacting to high temperatures. As sea levels rise, the share of property submerged by high tides increases dramatically, affecting a small sliver of the nation's land but a disproportionate share of its population. Some 50 million Americans live in 8 of the largest U.S. metro areas, Miami, New York, and Boston, among them, which all lie in some of the most affected counties in the U.S. With rising temperatures, it will become more difficult to grow food. Corn and soy are the most prevalent crops in the U.S. and the basis for livestock feed and other staple foods, and they have critical economic significance. Because of their broad regional spread, they offer the best proxy for predicting how farming will be affected by rising temperatures and changing water supplies. Corn and soy production is more sensitive to heat than drought, and it will decrease for every degree of warming. By mid-century, North Dakota, which already harvests millions of acres of both crops, will warm enough to allow for more growing days and higher yields. But parts of Texas and Oklahoma may see yields drop by more than 70%. With heat and ever more prevalent drought, the likelihood that very large wildfires, ones that burn over 12,000 acres, will affect U.S. regions increases substantially, particularly in the West, Northwest, and the Rocky Mountains, but also in Florida, Georgia, and the Southeast, according to peer-reviewed research published in the International Journal of Wildland Fire. By mid-century, the northern Great Basin, though not a densely forested region, will become the epicenter of large wildfires. These large, remote counties in Nevada and Oregon see cycles of wet and dry weather that turn the grassland into the fuel for fires that can easily rip through 10,000 acres a day with strong winds. Rising energy costs, lower labor productivity, poor crop yields, and increasing crime are among the climate-driven elements that will increasingly drag on the U.S. economy, eventually taking a financial toll that exceeds that from the COVID-19 pandemic. Populous cities with expensive real estate, including Houston and Miami, will see damage tallied in the billions, losses worth several percentage points of GDP, largely driven by storms, sea level rise, and deaths from high heat. Climate will have a larger proportional impact in rural places like Gulf County, Florida, which might lose half its economy.
This article is from the September 20th, 2020 issue of the magazine, and also published by ProPublica, with support from the Pulitzer Center. Written by Abram Lustgarten, and read by Eric Jason Martin. August besieged California with a heat unseen in generations. A surge in air conditioning broke the state's electrical grid, leaving a population already ravaged by the coronavirus to work remotely by the dim light of their cell phones. By mid-month, the state had recorded possibly the hottest temperature ever measured on Earth, 130 degrees in Death Valley, and an otherworldly storm of lightning had cracked open the sky. From Santa Cruz to Lake Tahoe, thousands of bolts of electricity exploded down onto withered grasslands and forests, some of them already hollowed out by climate-driven infestations of beetles and kiln-dried by the worst 5-year drought on record. Soon, California was on fire. Over the next 2 weeks, 900 blazes incinerated 6 times as much land as all the state's 2019 wildfires combined, forcing 100,000 people from their homes. 3 of the largest fires in history burned simultaneously in a ring around the San Francisco Bay Area. This summer has seen more fires, more heat, more storms, all of it making life increasingly untenable in larger areas of the nation. Already, droughts regularly threaten food crops across the West, while destructive floods inundate towns and fields from the Dakotas to Maryland, collapsing dams in Michigan and raising the shorelines of the Great Lakes. Rising seas and increasingly violent hurricanes are making thousands of miles of American shoreline nearly uninhabitable. As California burned, Hurricane Laura pounded the Louisiana coast with 150-mile-an-hour winds, killing at least 25 people. It was the 12th named storm to form by that point in 2020, another record. Phoenix, meanwhile, endured 53 days of 110-degree heat, 20 more days than the previous record. For years, Americans have avoided confronting these changes in their own backyards. The decisions we make about where to live are distorted not just by politics that play down climate risks, but also by expensive subsidies and incentives aimed at defying nature. In much of the developing world, vulnerable people will attempt to flee the emerging perils of global warming, seeking cooler temperatures, more fresh water, and safety. But here in the United States, people have largely gravitated toward environmental danger, building along coastlines from New Jersey to Florida and settling across the cloudless deserts of the Southwest. Across the United States, some 162 million people, nearly 1 in 2, will most likely experience a decline in the quality of their environment, namely more heat and less water. For 93 million of them, the changes could be particularly severe. If carbon emissions rise at extreme levels, at least 4 million Americans could find themselves living at the fringe, in places decidedly outside the ideal niche for human life. The cost of resisting the new climate reality is mounting. Florida officials have already acknowledged that defending some roadways against the sea will be unaffordable. And the nation's federal flood insurance program is for the first time requiring that some of its payouts be used to retreat from climate threats across the country. It will soon prove too expensive to maintain the status quo. Then what? One influential 2018 study, published in the Journal of the Association of Environmental and Resource Economists, suggests that 1 in 12 Americans in the southern half of the country will move toward California, the Mountain West, or the Northwest over the next 45 years because of climate influences alone. Such a shift in population is likely to increase poverty and widen the gulf between the rich and the poor. It will accelerate rapid, perhaps chaotic, urbanization of cities ill-equipped for the burden, testing their capacity to provide basic services and amplifying existing inequities. It will eat away at prosperity, dealing repeated economic blows to coastal, rural, and southern regions, which could in turn push entire communities to the brink of collapse. This process has already begun in rural Louisiana and coastal Georgia, where low-income and Black and Indigenous communities face environmental change on top of poor health and extreme poverty. Mobility itself, global migration experts point out, is often a reflection of relative wealth, and as some move, many others will be left behind. Those who stay risk becoming trapped as the land and the society around them ceases to offer any more support. There are signs that the message is breaking through. Half of Americans now rank climate as a top political priority, up from roughly 1/3 in 2016, and 3 out of 4 now describe climate change as either a crisis or a major problem. This year, Democratic caucus goers in Iowa, where tens of thousands of acres of farmland flooded in 2019, ranked climate second only to healthcare as an issue. A poll by researchers at Yale and George Mason universities found that even Republicans' views are shifting. 1 in 3 now think climate change should be declared a national emergency. Policymakers, having left America unprepared for what's next, now face brutal choices about which communities to save, often at exorbitant costs, and which to sacrifice. Their decisions will almost inevitably make the nation more divided, with those worst off relegated to a nightmare future in which they are left to fend for themselves. Nor will these disruptions wait for the worst environmental changes to occur. The wave begins when individual perception of risk starts to shift, when the environmental threat reaches past the least fortunate and rattles the physical and financial security of broader, wealthier parts of the population. It begins when even places like California's suburbs are no longer safe. It has already begun.
Thank you for calling CNN.
I'm Tracy. I'm calling from the foothills of Northern California. I'm calling because I've been sitting with the danger of living in California given the fires. We've been considering actually leaving our home, not wanting to spend summers filled with smoke. The big question I have is, if not here, where?
Tracy and her 5-year-old granddaughter live near the wildfires that have ripped across California in recent years.
My son, luckily, was visiting and staying with me for a while and woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, "Mom, I smell smoke." A lot of smoke, and I went outside and it was just thick. You couldn't breathe. The whole sky across the pond went red. And so I grabbed the baby at the time and the dog and a couple of important things, my laptop, and jumped in the truck and ran.
Her family evacuated safely and the house survived, but the worsening fires, which scientists link to the climate crisis, make Tracy worry about her granddaughter's future. She wants to leave.
I had always planned to live and die here. I didn't plan on moving again. You know, I'm lucky that I have a choice to go someplace else, but, you know, then the question becomes, well, where?
It's just a reality that some people are going to have no other option but to move. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality.
Nowhere is unaffected, but researchers like Jesse Keenan have started looking at places of so-called climate refuge, which may prove to be more resilient as humans continue to pollute the atmosphere and warm the climate.
Certainly this is on the scale of the Great Dust Bowl and the migration that came along with that. There's too many unknowns, but we do recognize that this is in the order of millions of people.
Keenan says there's one American city he believes is particularly well positioned to become a refuge for climate migrants like Tracy. That city? Duluth, Minnesota.
We are known as the San Francisco of the North. I'll let you decide if you think that's true.
I traveled to Duluth, and I did so a little skeptically. I've reported on climate migration for years, usually from locations like Honduras, Puerto Rico, the Marshall Islands, places where people are being pushed out of their home. Was there another and less visible migration already underway? One in which people are choosing sites of refuge?
You know, a handful of years ago, I would have thought, that's a one-off. It is much more common now.
Duluth is embracing the idea of itself as a climate safe haven.
It feels really sad to me that we are at a place and a stage that people are actually considering abandoning the history of who they've been, of who their family's been, of where they've lived, and actually choosing to leave that. And at the same time, if that means that people can find that and build that narrative for themselves here in Duluth, it's an extraordinary place, and we do want to be that for people.
The city's climate and geography are part of the reason that some scientists say Duluth will fare better than most. Duluth is known for its sub-zero temperatures, which are getting a little warmer. It's far from the coasts, and there's one other huge reason.
Lake Superior is the largest of the North American Great Lakes. It contains about 10% of the liquid fresh water on the planet. The shifts that we've seen in climate. Some of them, I think, arguably make it a little more pleasant. Warmer winters is not entirely unwelcome.
Local indigenous leaders near Duluth are concerned that a wave of climate migrants could further degrade the land and threaten their rights.
If you think northern Minnesota is beautiful, you're right. We welcome you. If you are going to come here, then you need to support us as indigenous people so that your climate solution doesn't end up in our cultural and spiritual genocide. This is treaty area for the Fond du Lac Band. And once again, we are going to bear the brunt of colonization. These will be new colonizers coming to the area. They're going to come here for reasons that have nothing to do with anything that tribal people have done.
People have been moved and removed from land for centuries. And so this concept of adding that kind of historical trauma into the conversation just makes it very, very complicated.
If you're coming for the clean water, can we still promise you clean water with 50,000 or 100,000 more people? Can we promise we're going to have a quality school or, an adaptable economy that meets everybody's needs? Don't kill the thing you love, And you can't stop individuals from doing it, but you can plan for it.
For now, Keenan and other researchers say many Americans are continuing to move toward the places that we know are becoming more dangerous. Toward the coast or toward the Southwest, for example, which is becoming more arid. But a few climate migrants are showing up in Duluth already. Do you consider yourself a climate migrant?
Yeah, I do. I think that's really hard to say, because I think on some level it sounds like we're giving up on California.
Jamie Alexander fled San Francisco with her husband and 2 children, unsure where to go, but certain that they couldn't stay for another wildfire season.
The 2018 Camp Fire happened, and that really changed everything for me. Our home didn't feel habitable to us anymore.
They miss San Francisco, but Alexander says Duluth has welcomed her family, and she couldn't be more grateful.
We are all sort of in this unknown together. There's no guidebook for this, and I found that really disconcerting, but also I think it helps us see our shared humanity in all of this.
I called up Tracy, whose message launched this trip, to see what she would make of this. What do you think about Duluth, Minnesota?
I'll go look. Maybe it's closer to San Francisco now than I realized. If so, that would be wonderful. Anywhere up north is cold, so it's not about the cold, it's really the culture.
She plans to move in the coming year.
I'm definitely going. I've decided we're going.
Still, she's not sure exactly where she'll go.
There's going to be a lot of work to be done no matter where that place is. So whether you stay or go, I think that, the work is very similar that we all have to do and how we live independently and together.
I can smell it and feel it, yeah.
People in New York City masking up again, not because of COVID, but due to harmful smoke wafting into the city. Right now, New York City is among the top 5 most air-polluted cities in the world. At one point, the air quality index soared past 200 Tuesday night, according to New York City Mayor Eric Adams. That's a very unhealthy level. The poor air quality is caused by more than 150 active wildfires burning in Canada. The smoke from those fires creating a haze for millions.
It should be super crowded. Everybody should be trying to get the good air, but it's not crowded. That tells you something, right?
More than 40 million people across the Northeast, Midwest, and Mid-Atlantic are under air quality alerts, affecting areas around Boston, shrouding Pittsburgh in smoke, while leaving Hartford, Connecticut under dense haze and smoke lingering over New Jersey. But the haze did not stop all New Yorkers from venturing outside on Tuesday.
I'm not just going to stay in the house because of air quality.
It is a little hazy, but they say, you know, you shouldn't do strenuous activity, but I feel like I can go for a run right now. You know I shouldn't, maybe.
Sports and family medicine physician Tyler Wheeler warns, even if you can't see the smoke, it can still cause harm.
The particle sizes are really very small, which allows them to penetrate deeply into the lung tissue. So what the smoke generally does to the lungs, the thought is that it increases inflammation into the lungs.
At least 10 school districts in central New York have canceled outdoor activities due to poor air quality, which is not expected to improve in the coming days, as a cold front will likely push more smoke south and east into the U.S.
Children who are at higher risk of lung conditions, it certainly would be appropriate to minimize their exposure to the outdoor air.